Here's Corin. You can pass on through in the background. It's okay, Chad. You're allowed. We're all family here. Hi, I'm Corin.
Hello, I am Lacie.
Lacie. Is that the name you were given at birth by your parents?
Yes.
Lacie. And do you like it?
I do.
Yeah.
It's very different, and I will never find my name on a keychain.
I grew up with the nickname Corky by my grandmother, and it was rough after a while. You know, unless you're a professional surfer or stuntman, the name Corky just doesn't grow old well.
Nope.
Unless you get really, really old. Like if you're like a 98-year-old man named Corky, it makes perfect sense.
It does. Absolutely.
Where were you
Telling
born?
you some old stories of the war or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. I love it. Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, Captain Corky.
Yep.
Where were you born at?
I was born in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
Jacksonville. It's a nice place. I've been there a few times.
It's cool. The one thing I remember is there's this big orange T-Rex like statue, and it's been there like forever, and we would always pass by it on the way to school. I don't remember. I think me and my brothers tried to name him at some point. But it's like bright orange, like you can't miss it.
How long did you live in Jacksonville for?
About halfway through my 5th grade year of school, so I'm not sure how many years that is, but I remember like where I was at in school when we moved.
Yeah, yeah. And how old are you now?
I am now almost 23. I'm going to be 23 in September.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, going back to, so you moved out of Jacksonville partway through 5th grade. Where'd you move to?
Here in Louisiana, we moved to Lafayette first, and then we jumped around to a couple different cities, and then we're in Lafayette again now.
Okay. And what do you think of Lafayette?
It's really cool. The people are extremely nice, and most of them are really good people. They will give you the shit off their back, you know, without even asking questions if you need it. And, you know, it was a cool change from growing up the way I did to seeing so many people so open-hearted so easily.
Yeah.
So I really like it here.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How long did you live in Lafayette for again? I mean, I'm sorry. How long did you live? So when you moved from Jacksonville,
Yes.
you went straight to
Yes. So we moved
To
from
Lafayette.
Jacksonville, Florida, to Louisiana.
Lafayette,
Yes.
and then you moved around a little bit, and then back to Lafayette.
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we've moved a lot.
Yes. I know. I was on that caravan too when I was a kid. Moving around a lot though, did you move around within the same school district, or were you popping in and out of school districts as well?
It was usually within the same school district, so that made it a bit easier. For the sense that I didn't have to get used to new schools as many times as some other people that move around a lot.
Yeah.
But I've blocked out most of my school life, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
I was bullied for all 12 years severely.
Really?
Yeah, constantly getting jumped, getting called names, all kinds of things. Just example, one time for my 13th birthday, I had mentioned during the week, I think I was talking to my bus driver because she was like the only one that would talk to me. The whole bus would make fun of me, school would make fun of me, teachers, everybody.
What?
Yeah, no, it was bad. So I had mentioned, because I saw another girl get on with one of those like big poster boards that they would fold in half to make a giant card.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that's so cool. That would be so cool to like have one of those, but like I don't have any friends, so whatever, I'll just have to ask my parents. Apparently, one of the kids on the bus heard me, and I got on the bus on my 13th birthday, and I saw a card in the back of the bus, and I always sat in the front because I had been stabbed with a pencil. I still have the scar.
Oh,
I've been
gosh.
stabbed,
Yeah.
I was like beat up or whatever, so I just sat in the front of the bus next to the bus driver because they couldn't really get to me there.
Yeah.
And I saw a card on the back seat and it said happy birthday Lacie, and at the time I was like, oh, is this actually going to be a good day, because I was already suicidal and a self-harmer.
Right.
So I was like, is this going to be a good day, like are things actually turning around? But when I opened it, it was like just insults and all kinds of other stuff, and we had a rule on the bus that once the bus starts moving, you can't stand up and move.
No.
So I had already sat down and had to stay in the back of the bus with everyone like waiting for me to say thank you for this card, and when I didn't, they actually started to fuss at me for not being grateful that I got a card.
Right.
So that's just one example. I'm not gonna bore you with more horror stories.
How old were you then during that particular example?
Well, it was my 13th birthday, so I was turning 13 that day.
Okay, that's right. You
Yeah.
said that. So at 13, that's a very important age when you're coming into young adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
With that kind of experience, I mean, what was your outlook like on your future at that point?
It was not good, admittedly. I actually started dealing with clinical depression as early as 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
Just from the bullying, the constant attacks or whatever. By the time I was in 4th grade, I started self-harming.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't cut myself because I didn't want to get caught, so instead I would just hit my head on things,
Right.
which is a form of self-harm.
Oh, absolutely.
So by the time I reached 8th grade, around that like teenager kind of age, like I was all the way into suicidal thoughts, self-harm. I didn't think I had a future, and it was a really hard time. And I was still going to church at the time because I come from a Christian family.
Yeah.
But that was really hard too, because a lot of the times I couldn't make sense of, okay, wait, Jesus loves me, but nobody else does? Like, that doesn't make sense. Or God is good, but my life is terrible. Like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, I didn't really think I had a future. That outlook has changed, praise God. But it was definitely difficult to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What obviously going into high school, we don't have to rehash all of the experiences there, but when you were coming out of high school and you're finally like, okay, this part of my life is about to be over, did you have a sense of relief, or was there an even greater anxiety about an unknown future?
There was definitely some anxiety, but the tipping point, I guess, was definitely back in 8th grade,
Uh-huh.
right before I went into high school. So when I was in 8th grade, I went on my first retreat, like my first church retreat, and God radically met me there, and it's a big long thing, but He radically met me there, and I was like, okay, well, I've tried everything else, and I really don't want to die. I don't. I'm still hoping that there's something more than all of the pain I feel. So if I've tried everything else and nothing else has worked, I might as well try this too, because it's better than dying. So I went ahead and I made the choice to give my life over to God, and I didn't immediately have the healing that I was kind of expecting, but I did notice a change. So as I went into high school and I was still getting bullied and still dealing with a lot of that stuff from teachers and students, it didn't seem as intense as it was, because everyone was focusing more on their own things.
Right.
But also, even when it did get bad, it didn't feel like I was so alone anymore.
Right.
And I was thinking back on it, in my senior year or whatever, and I was like, how did I get here? Like, how did I manage to get through all of that? Because there were times where I literally could imagine myself going in the kitchen and grabbing a knife or grabbing one of my dad's guns or whatever.
Right.
And I couldn't, because there was this little voice in my head, and I didn't know what it was at the time, but now I believe it was the Holy Spirit. It was God talking to me. But there was this little voice in my head that says, hey, you have to hang on. And I was like, I don't want to. Every single day it was the same argument. I don't want to.
I've heard that voice. I've heard that
right?
voice. Oh yeah.
And
I know that voice.
He just told me, he's like, okay, but there's people that you haven't met yet that need to know what you're going through right now. I'm like, nobody needs me. My family doesn't need me. It's like, I'm not talking about your family. I don't have friends. I'm not talking about them. You haven't met these people yet. They don't know you exist yet, but they will, and they need you, and you need to hang on. And I was like, no. And so every day we would make the same deal. Give me tomorrow. If you give me tomorrow, I promise things are going to start improving, but I need you to give me tomorrow. And I would go the next day and things would be terrible again, and I would get home and we would have the same argument. Give me tomorrow. And I'm like, fine. Well, finally, by the time I got into high school, I could start seeing glimpses of that tomorrow that I kept agreeing to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And it really taught me, like, hey, things aren't always going to make sense, but if you keep going one day at a time, like, just get to tomorrow. Tomorrow you start again. If it's still bad, get to the next day. Because eventually the cycle's going to break.
Right.
And you just have to get to that breaking point and then you'll be able to see how far you came if you look behind you.
Yeah.
It's hard to see your progress when all you see is this big stretch of road out in front of you. But if you just keep walking, you're gonna look behind you and you'll be like, "Oh, look at all that ground I covered."
All that ground I covered. You're absolutely
And
right.
it's hard to
So
it's
true.
hard to see that if you're so focused on where you're trying to get to. So sometimes it helps to look back and be like, "Oh wow, I came from there."
Yeah, reflection, doing healthy reflection. You know,
It's like I'm
there's-
not there yet, but look at that.
Exactly. Yeah. In my acting class, we my teacher Manu Tupo, he didn't teach what they call method acting, where you use sense memory and emotional recall to create emotion and characters and stuff like that. You know, he was a creationist kind of theory about acting, that if you believe in the moment, that the emotions will come and stuff like that. But his point is that when you dredge up all of the harmful and difficult moments in your life to generate emotion, you start dragging that baggage around with you. So what I mean by that is getting into the reflection part. When you look back on life, there's a healthy reflection and there's an
Exactly.
unhealthy reflection.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so the fact that you could look back on a life that was obviously filled with your own personal ups and downs and ins and outs, you know, that you can look back on it and reflect on the moments of light that were occurring. I
Yep.
commend you on that.
And now I get this really cool thing that not a lot of people do, where I've had youth students in church come up to me and be like, "Hey, I'm dealing with this," and I can look at them and I can be like, "This is what it sounds like and this is how it makes you feel." And one of the first lies that you start hearing when you're going to that mindset is, no one else understands this because they can't hear it. They're not in my head, they're not in my body, they don't feel it. But the fact that I can look at them and say, "Hey, this is what it is," it stops them, and then they listen to me because I'm like, "Look, I've been there, but now I'm here, and so I'm gonna be a living example."
So you're a mentor to these.
Right.
these
It's like I'm
kids,
gonna show you that there's something on the other side of this, and it sucks right now, but just a little bit longer. Give me tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's tough. How are we doing on is it rolling still? We're good? Yeah. I got to check now. I'm
I know.
paranoid.
I get it.
You know, that said, you know, being a mentor is very important. We don't have that enough in the world today. The mentorship kind of programs and the effect that can have. But what does being a mentor give back to you? I know what you can give to them, but what is it
Yes.
giving back to you?
It definitely helps me keep a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, all of the pain and the things that I went through, it wasn't just because. You know, there's a reason at the end of it, and then I love being able to see other people find their victory over the situations that they go through, and just having a hand in that, knowing like, hey, my experiences was able to be that thing that pushed them to tomorrow,
Yeah.
because I know how low that place gets.
Yeah.
And I know how much I needed someone to do what I'm doing now.
Absolutely.
So the fact that I can fill in that gap, not only for them, but for the past me, like that's really important to me.
Yes, absolutely. I can see how that would give you the vigor, you know, that it takes to, you know, to keep fulfilling all of these deeper things, because it's an altruistic gesture to, you know, to be a mentor. I think, you know, unless you're a really crappy mentor, you know. But that said, when you were coming out of high school, what were you projecting for yourself in your life? At that point, you had some kind of awakening. I mean, I'm assuming you would stop some of the self-abuse things and all
I
of
did.
that.
I stopped self-harming in 8th grade, but my depression and suicidal thoughts didn't stop until about junior year.
Junior year, yeah,
So.
yeah. So, and you know, so this is really important to hear, as a matter of fact, for anybody who's younger, because you know, to know that you have these types of thoughts and feelings, that it's not, it's transitory. It's a temporary setback.
Yeah.
That if you just have faith in something deeper and greater than yourself, and you add some works to that, you can, you like you said, you can look back and see, wow, I did that.
Yeah.
You know.
And something I like to say is, you shouldn't answer a temporary issue with a permanent choice. So something like suicide, it's extremely permanent, obviously. Like there's no undoing that. There's no coming back and being like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." But the situation that you're in, as hard as it is temporary. The world that we live in exists on temporary cycles. We go to winter and things are dead and terrible, and then we come back to summer again. The sun goes down, the sun comes back up. So you have to just believe, like, eventually things are going to turn around. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do that, but if you even have even a tiny bit of trust, like, hey, this is not going to stay this way forever, because it has to be temporary, because that is the state of the world.
That's true.
So it has to come around eventually, and if you can just keep getting through moment by moment, day by day, you're gonna see that sunrise again, and you're gonna be able to look back and be like, wow, I got through all of that. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
you don't have to take the temporary and be like, oh, this is just how it is. Like, no, you don't have to accept that, please.
Right.
No.
Right. I completely agree, 100%. So as far as, because we all have life survival issues and making money and having a career and trying to do something that we like, what was, did you have a vision for yourself and your life? And when you were coming out of high school in those final years, did you finally go, okay, this is the direction I need to go, and this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to accomplish? Or did you flounder around a little?
I jumped around a bit.
Uh-huh.
I took a year off in between high school and going to Bible school to try and figure out what was going on. And I was going to go to traditional college, but that didn't work out. And then I really felt led to go to a Bible school in the church that I was going to at the time, and I graduated from that last year. And then I'm still kind of kicking around the idea of maybe going to traditional college, but I'm like, I don't know. So I did kick around a few different ideas as far as like life goals, but I really settled on staying in that mentor role, really, and being the person that I needed back then. So now I'm working on writing a book and getting a nonprofit put together to help people get access to therapy if they need it and can't afford it, because therapy is expensive. And I know, because I just started it myself, and I'm grateful to have a therapist who's willing to work with all different levels of finances.
Sure.
So his normal rates are as expensive as normally, but he's we're working out something. But
Well, it's important that, as a human being, you should have a
Yeah.
fluctuating scale in life depending on situations. I
Exactly.
think that's just kind of a give, but most people don't. Most
Exactly.
people's scales
Yeah.
just have a stopping point either up here and down here,
Yeah.
and there's zero fluctuation in between.
Right. So the book is going to be called The Cliffside, and it's basically just about my personal experience growing up as a Christian, dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts and all of that, and kind of the things I had to learn myself about how psychology fits in with Scripture.
Yes,
For
absolutely.
those Christians that don't hear enough about those struggles in church, because everyone wants to focus on the joy and the whatever, and then they're sitting in the background like, okay, but what about this? And my experience was I got a lot of the same cookie cutter Bible verses, but no one could tell me how to apply it. No one could tell me how to use it or whatever. And it just made me angry at the end of the day. And I'm like, this can't make sense, because if this is true, then this wouldn't be happening.
Right.
So the book is really to just kind of bring those two worlds together and show how they can mix, and that you don't have to have one without the other. Like, you don't have to be a Christian and never feel hurt.
Yeah, of
You don't
course.
have
Yes.
to be in therapy and not be a Christian because therapy is for worldly people. Like, no. You
Right.
can have both of them at the same time and still not counter your faith. And I'm hoping that once it's finished, the goal is to have it finished by the end of the year, beginning of next year. Like, I'm really trying to keep that deadline. Once it's finished, I'm hoping that it will sell really well, and then the funds from that are going to be used to start the nonprofit
Okay.
to help with getting access to therapy for those that can't afford it. Also, if you need medicine, we'll help you get that, and get you access to counselors, groups, churches. If
That
you
have a spiritual based
Right.
therapy,
So it's a-
therapeutic
Right.
process, because
it's a lot like the ministry Teen Challenge that works with drug people or whatever, except it's therapy and mental health related.
right.
And even as far as like, hey, if you need to be institutionalized for a little bit, because that's a form of mental health care too, we'll help cover the cost of that.
Right.
So I'm really, really excited about it.
And what's the name of the book going to be called?
The Cliffside.
The Cliffside.
And
which
then
is a great,
the
a great
foundation
title.
will be the Cliffside Project.
The
So
Cliffside
like,
Project.
yeah.
We have to remember all of this stuff.
Yes. So I'm actually following you guys on Instagram now, so you'll see it.
We'll follow you back. Even though it's just a side note, but some of the founders of psychology, Sigmund Freud and Eric Newman and Jung, and a lot of them all got a lot of their ideas out of Kabbalah, which is the ancient Judaic mysticism of Old Testament, religion
the
and
Torah
everything.
and all of that.
Yeah, so it's interesting that when you were saying that, I was like, Well, it's all right in there together.
Exactly. And a lot of people separate them so much because,
Right.
oh, if it's psychology, it must be science, which is just worldly. And if it's scripture, then the Bible will tell me everything. And I'm like, okay, Jesus is enough. I believe that.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt to need that extra practicality.
Sure.
Not everything is spiritual. You need the practical too.
Yeah.
I mean, like, money's not spiritual.
No.
But it's a practical tool that we use in everyday life. It's the same thing with mental health. And even a lot of the medical world, they see physical health here and mental health down here.
Right.
But they play off of each other all the time. You
Absolutely.
can't separate them.
Wow.
So after growing up in a world that didn't have that conversation, I'm like, okay, it's time to start this because
I love it.
I'm seeing it damage so many other people
Yeah.
because people aren't talking about it. So if y'all aren't going to talk about it, I will.
Well, and I'm just so impressed at your age, at this young of an age, that you have really grounded yourself in a very positive and life-affirming outlook and a program that will obviously benefit a lot of young people who need this type of
I hope so.
mentorship and help and care and all of that, like we all do, because most often the advice from our parents or our parental figures or people, authoritarian type figures, a lot of times, even though it be great advice, it's not taken because
Yeah.
the source it came from, there
Exactly.
might be something there that's just, I was very anti-authoritarian myself when I was growing up. So
Yeah.
if a teacher gave me great advice, I'm like, I'm not taking it from you. You're a teacher.
Yeah.
But
It's like, what do you know?
but if the carpenter down the street who I admired, who just
Exactly.
like built some really cool chairs in his garage, and I was like, man, this guy's awesome. If he told me the exact same thing, I'd be like, that's the best advice
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, I
So-
had a phase like that too, where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to listen to you, but because I already respect this person, I'll take it from them. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's the same advice, but the source really does matter. And that's
Yeah.
a big part of making sure my story is a part of it. Because it goes back to like, hey, I can literally tell you what's in your head and how it feels and how you hear it.
Yeah.
And I can do that because I heard it myself.
Exactly.
So I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's not like learning the techniques, therapy techniques, different, without having had any of those experiences.
Exactly.
And then trying to apply those techniques to somebody who's going through something very
Right.
traumatic. If you've never been traumatized yourself,
Exactly.
I mean, that's like trying to, it's like trying to figure out what makes a crystal ball work,
Yeah.
It's
And I've had pastors before tell me things like, oh, we don't want to mention suicide or depression because we don't want them to think about it. And I'm just like,
that's
I started having depression in 2nd grade. They're already thinking about it. The
Exactly.
fact that you're not talking about it is making it worse on them.
totally.
So I'm hoping that the book will show like the young Christian who might be going through anxiety, depression, whatever, like, hey, you can have both of these and it's not harmful. And here's how you apply it. So it's not just giving them the knowledge. It's okay, how do I use the knowledge to help me?
Yeah.
Because that was the other thing that I didn't have access to. There was no one to tell me how to use the knowledge I was getting.
Right. Totally. On that note, to just bring a full circle, and I am curious what advice you would have for young adults like yourself or kids coming up out of the junior high school age. What advice could you give them, or recommendation that you could give them to help them through this time period that they're going through of transition, should they maybe need it? Just something for them to chew on.
Yeah, I would definitely just bring up again, like, it is a temporary situation. It is really hard, and I know, like, better than anybody probably how hard it can be, but just keep looking for the sunrise, because every day you wake up, it's a new chance for something to change. And don't do something that I did. Like, I know that everyone's like, oh, kill them with kindness, and that doesn't really make sense a lot of time when you're like, okay, but they're still attacking me. It helps if you don't react with fire, because putting fire on top of a fire doesn't de-escalate the situation. All it does is make things worse, and they're going to come back harder the next time. So killing people with kindness, it may not really make sense in the moment, but you can still take those attacks and respond to them with like, hey, I'm not going to attack you because I value you as a person. And it is true most of the time that a lot of kids who are doing the attacking are doing it out of not knowing how to process what they're going through. So sometimes cliches can get said so much that you kind of tune them out.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, let me rephrase it and just be like, hey, this is hard, but some of these cliches might help you. Keep looking for your sunrise. Know that things go through cycles. It's gonna come around eventually, even if it's little by little. Take a breath. You're not gonna solve it all overnight.
Yeah.
As much as you may want to, because I wanted to.
Oh, tell me about it.
And also, don't, like, I'm not gonna say don't fight back in the sense of like let people continually come against you. Like, have boundaries. You know, don't let people stay close to you and know that they're still hurting you. Like, you need to have boundaries. You need to cut people off if you have to, because toxicity is never good. But you don't have to attack them for attacking you.
Right.
So like if you were like, hey, you're a stupid idiot, I could be like, well, I mean, you might think that, but hey, I really like your smile. Can you smile?
Right.
They're like, yeah, okay. And it'll catch them off guard a lot of the time, because they're like, I'm expecting you to cry or like get mad or something. Like, why are you doing this? Or something I started doing when I was in high school is I would just go to random people and pick up my own mood by complimenting random people. I'd be like, hey, I really like your shirt today. Or like, oh my gosh, that is such a cool phone. Like, find something,
right.
anything. And giving to others, it helps me to bring up my own mood, because it's something that's not focusing on everything I'm going through. And then seeing the positive reactions, it's like, oh, there's still some good in the world. Look at that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting out of yourself. And helping to benefit somebody else, whether it be by compliment or by physical, helping them out physically in some way. That is definitely a huge factor, I think, in maintaining a type of communal bond that we've lost in so many ways.
Definitely.
And
especially with social media, like everything is about impressing everybody with your highlights, and it's like, okay, let's go back to being real for a second, And I learned something recently, that your thoughts are a precursor to action.
Yes.
Which I've heard before, but I've never really like considered how true that is.
Yeah.
So if I'm focusing constantly on the negatives, I'm gonna have a panic attack because I'm focusing on the negatives. I literally had one today, because I got some bad news and my mind went zoom bad.
Right.
Straight down. And I had to get someone else to be like, okay, but here's a positive, here's a positive, here's a positive. By shifting my focus to, okay, this is positive, so not everything is terrible, I was able to calm down. So definitely keeping your focus on more uplifting things rather than focusing always on what's going wrong, because your perception defines the reality you see. If I'm only looking at the negative, I'm going to perceive a negative reality, and that's going to take my mood down. But if I'm trying to find the good, there's a saying, every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. So I might have a bad day today, but this is a good situation.
Yeah.
So I could be like, okay, this morning was bad, but talking to Corbin was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's changing your focus and letting your thoughts stay on positives, and then your body and actions will follow what you're doing. So
I don't want to. I could talk to her for hours, but that right there, no, it's such a great conversation. But that right there is a great moment to close and to chew on that, and also, if you have some kids that are around her age or in their late teens, early 20s or whatever, this is a really positive interview for you to share with them, I think. And I appreciate it.
Even for parents, don't be afraid to talk to your kids about this, because like starting the conversation is one of the most important things, that they know that they can bring it up. One of the things that really hurt me was that I didn't think I could bring it up to my parents, and that kept me in hiding for years, which made it worse.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to talk about it.
And she's going to be starting her own podcast
Yes,
soon.
I am.
Which she's going to rock at, I can assure you. And I'm very excited for everything that's going on in your future.
Yeah. And maybe I'll get to speak at some conferences.
Incredible.
We'll see.
I bet you will. Love America Tour. That's what it's all about.